Right now, as you're reading this, something is happening that you're completely unaware of. You're breathing. You've done it thousands of times already today, and you'll do it thousands more before you sleep tonight. But you haven't noticed most of them. And that might be the most important thing I tell you today. Because those unconscious breaths, the ones you're taking without awareness, without intention, without presence, they're not just keeping you alive, they're creating your reality. And most of the time, they're creating it on autopilot. What if I told you that the difference between the life you have and the life you want exists in the space between your inhale and your exhale? That every breath you take is either reinforcing the patterns that keep you stuck or building the reality you're trying to create. This isn't poetry. This isn't metaphor. This is how consciousness actually works. And once you understand it, once you experience it even once, everything changes. Not because you learned a new technique, but because you discovered who you actually are underneath all the thinking, all the doing, all the constant mental noise. You discovered the observer, and the observer changes everything. Take a breath right now. Don't change it. Don't make it deeper or slower. Just notice it exactly as it is. Where is it coming from? Is it shallow, sitting high in your chest? Is it quick, like you're always preparing for something? Or is it deep and slow, filling your entire body? Most people breathe like they're running from something. Short, shallow breaths that keep the body just alive enough but never truly nourished. This is survival breathing, the kind that tells your nervous system that danger is always around the corner, that you need to stay alert, that relaxation is a luxury you can't afford. And your body listens. It organizes itself around that message. It creates stress hormones. It tightens your muscles. It narrows your focus to threats and problems. And then your mind follows, creating thoughts that match the state your breathing has created. You're anxious, so you think anxious thoughts. You're tense, so you interpret everything through tension. You're in survival mode, so you see life as something to get through rather than something to experience. But here's what changes everything. Your breath isn't just responding to your state, it's creating it. Which means when you change how you breathe, you change your entire reality from the inside out. This isn't about taking a few deep breaths when you're stressed. This is about understanding that breath is the bridge between your unconscious patterns and your conscious power. And when you learn to cross that bridge, you become someone completely different. Right now, there's a voice in your head. It's been talking since you woke up this morning. Maybe it's commenting on these words. Maybe it's thinking about what you need to do later. Maybe it's judging whether this is worth your time. And you probably think that voice is you. That's the assumption most people live with their entire lives. The voice in your head equals who you are. Your thoughts define you. Your internal commentary is your identity. But watch what happens when you breathe consciously. Take a slow breath in, hold it for a moment, then release it slowly. While you were doing that, where was the voice? It was probably still there, maybe commenting on the breath, maybe getting distracted. But here's the key. If you can hear that voice, if you can observe those thoughts, then you cannot be those thoughts. You must be something else, something deeper, something that exists before the thinking begins. This is the observer, the part of you that watches everything but is disturbed by nothing. The awareness that has been present your entire life, constant and unchanging, while everything else shifted and changed around it. When you were 5 years old, you had the observer. When you're 90, you'll still have it. It doesn't age, it doesn't change. It's the eternal witness to your life, the consciousness that experiences everything but is defined by nothing. Because breath exists at the intersection of the conscious and unconscious. You can breathe automatically without thinking about it, but you can also take control of your breath consciously whenever you choose. This makes breath the perfect doorway, the bridge between the part of you that's running on autopilot and the part of you that's fully awake, fully present, fully aware. There's a moment that most people never notice. It happens thousands of times a day, but it's so brief, so subtle, that it slips past awareness completely. It's the pause between breaths, that fraction of a second after you inhale, before you exhale, and the pause after you exhale, before you inhale again. In those pauses, everything stops. Your lungs are still, your thoughts quiet for just an instant. And in that instant, there's a doorway, a gap in the constant stream of mental activity where something else can emerge. Ancient traditions understood this. They called it different things in different cultures, but they all recognized the same truth. In the space between breaths, you touch something timeless, something beyond your ordinary mind, something that exists outside the constant flow of time and thought. This isn't mystical, it's experiential. Try it right now. Take a breath in, and at the top of the inhale, pause. Not holding tightly, just resting. Notice what happens in that pause. Then exhale, and at the bottom of the exhale, pause again. In those moments, can you feel it? The quieting, the settling, the sense that for just a second everything that was moving has stopped. And in that stopping there's clarity, there's peace, there's a knowing that doesn't come from thinking but from simply being. This is where your power lives. Not in the constant doing, the constant thinking, the constant moving forward, but in the pauses, in the spaces, in the moments when you stop trying and start being. And the more you practice noticing these pauses, the more they expand. What starts as a fraction of a second becomes a full second, then two, then longer. And in that expansion you discover something remarkable. Time is not what you thought it was. When you're fully present in the pause, when you're resting in that space of pure awareness, time doesn't disappear, it deepens. A single moment becomes infinite. And in that infinity you have access to possibilities that don't exist in the rushing forward of ordinary consciousness. Your body is holding stories you don't even remember. Every experience you've ever had, every emotion you've ever felt, every moment of joy or pain or fear or love, it's all stored in the tissues of your body. That tightness in your shoulders might be carrying stress from years ago. The knot in your stomach could be holding anxiety about the future. The tension in your jaw might be from words you never allowed yourself to speak. Your body is not just a vehicle for your mind, it's an intelligent system that's been recording your entire life, and most of that recording is unconscious, below your awareness, hidden in the places you've learned not to feel. But when you breathe consciously, when you bring awareness into your body through the breath, something starts to shift. The breath doesn't just move air through your lungs, it moves energy through your entire system. And that energy starts to dissolve the blockages, the tensions, the stored patterns that have been running your life from beneath the surface. Think of it like this. Your body is a house with many rooms. Most of your life you've been living in just a few rooms, the ones that feel safe and familiar. But there are whole floors of this house you've never explored. Rooms you locked up because what was in them felt too painful or too overwhelming to face. Conscious breathing is like slowly opening those doors, not forcing them, not demanding they open, just gently, gradually, allowing yourself to enter spaces you've avoided for years. And what you find there isn't what you expected. Yes, there might be old pain, old sadness, old fear, but underneath all of that is something else, something that's been waiting for you to come back, your wholeness, your completeness, the parts of yourself you abandoned to survive, now ready to be reclaimed. This is why conscious breathing can sometimes bring up emotion. It's not creating new problems, it's clearing old ones, releasing what's been stuck, making space for who you actually are to finally emerge. Here's something most people don't know. Your breath creates an energy field around you. It's not mystical, it's electromagnetic, and it extends several feet from your body in all directions. When you breathe from stress, from anxiety, from fear, that field broadcasts chaos. People can feel it, even if they don't consciously realize what they're feeling. They get tense around you. Conversations feel harder, connection feels forced. But when you breathe from presence, from calm, from that observer space we've been exploring, your field broadcasts something completely different. It broadcasts coherence, harmony, peace, and people respond to that too. They relax around you, they open up, things flow more easily, not because you're doing anything to them, but because your state is influencing the field, and they're responding to the field. This is why certain people seem to carry peace with them wherever they go. Why some people can walk into a chaotic situation, and the energy shifts. They're not trying to control anyone or anything. They've just learned to regulate their own state, and that regulation naturally influences everything around them. Your breath is the key to this, because your breath directly affects your nervous system, and your nervous system directly affects the field you're broadcasting. When you're in survival breathing, short and shallow, your nervous system thinks you're in danger. It activates stress responses, and those responses create a field of tension that others can feel. But when you shift to conscious breathing, slow and deep, your nervous system recognizes safety. It activates rest and restoration, and that creates a field of calm that others naturally move toward. You become like a tuning fork, and everyone around you begins to match your frequency without even knowing why. There's a paradox at the heart of all creation. The most powerful force is often the one that appears to do nothing. Think of a mountain. It doesn't move, it doesn't strive, it doesn't push or force or demand. It simply exists, solid and unshakable, and yet rivers flow around it. Weather systems form above it. Entire ecosystems organize themselves in relation to it. The mountain's power isn't in action, it's in presence. in being so completely itself that everything else arranges around it. This is what happens when you learn to breathe from the observer. You stop trying to control reality through constant doing. You stop pushing and forcing and striving. Instead, you become still, deeply, profoundly still. And from that stillness, everything begins to organize around you, not because you're making it happen, but because you've stopped interfering with what's trying to happen naturally. Most people approach life like they're swimming upstream, constantly fighting against the current, using all their energy just to stay in place. And they're exhausted because they think that's what success requires. More effort, more struggle, more pushing through. But the observer breath reveals a different way. You stop swimming upstream. You find the still point in the center of the current. And from that still point you can see the flow. You can feel where the water wants to go. And instead of fighting it, you move with it. This doesn't mean becoming passive. This doesn't mean giving up on your desires or your goals. It means becoming so aligned with what wants to emerge that your actions become effortless. They stop feeling like work and start feeling like flow. People who master this look like they're doing very little, but they're accomplishing what others can't achieve through years of struggle because they've found the still point, the place where all movement originates, the center that doesn't move but organizes everything around it. And that center is accessed through breath, through the practice of returning, again and again, to the observer, to the awareness that watches everything but is disturbed by nothing. So how do you actually do this? How do you move from understanding these concepts to living them? It's simpler than you think, but it requires something most people resist: consistency. Start with just 5 minutes a day. That's all. Find a quiet place where you won't be interrupted. Sit comfortably, but with your spine relatively straight. This isn't about being rigid. It's about allowing energy to flow freely through your body. Close your eyes and bring your attention to your breath. Don't try to change it at first. Just notice it. Is it fast or slow? Shallow or deep? Smooth or ragged? No judgment, just observation. This is you practicing being the observer. You're not the breath. You're the awareness watching the breath. Feel the difference. After a minute or so of just watching, begin to slow your breath down naturally. Breathe in for a count of 4. Pause at the top for a count of 4. Breathe out for a count of 4. Pause at the bottom for a count of 4. This creates a rhythm, a pattern. And patterns are what calm the nervous system. They signal safety. They tell your body that everything is okay. As you breathe like this, you'll notice thoughts arising. This is normal. This is what the mind does. But instead of following the thoughts, instead of getting lost in them, just notice them. Watch them appear like clouds in the sky, and watch them disappear. Every time you catch yourself lost in thought, that's not failure, that's success. Because catching yourself means you've become the observer again. You've stepped back into awareness. And that's the practice, not preventing thoughts, but noticing when you've been caught by them, and returning to the breath. In those pauses between breaths, rest. Don't rush to the next inhale or exhale. Let yourself hang in that space for a moment. This is where the magic happens. This is where the observer becomes most clear. And here's what's important. You won't feel dramatically different after 5 minutes. You might not even feel different at all at first. But you're creating a new pattern, a new pathway in your nervous system, and over time that pathway becomes stronger. After a week you'll notice small things. Maybe you don't react as quickly to stress. Maybe you pause before responding in situations that used to trigger you immediately. Maybe you feel slightly more spacious inside, like there's room between you and your thoughts. After a month, the changes become more obvious. People might comment that you seem calmer. You might notice that problems that used to consume you now feel manageable. You might find yourself less caught in worry about the future or regret about the past. After 3 months, you'll realize you're different. Not because you tried to change who you are, but because you remembered who you actually are. The observer was always there. You just learned how to live from that place instead of from the constant mental chatter. Once this becomes your natural state, once the observer breath becomes second nature, your entire experience of life transforms. And I don't mean that in a vague spiritual sense. I mean practically, tangibly, measurably. Decision-making becomes easier because you're no longer making decisions from fear or anxiety or the need to prove something. You're making them from clarity, from that still center that knows without needing to think. Relationships change because you're no longer reacting from old wounds or unconscious patterns. You're responding from presence, from the part of you that can see what's actually happening, instead of projecting old stories onto new situations. Your nervous system regulates itself. Stress doesn't disappear from your life, but your relationship to it changes completely. Instead of being overwhelmed by stress, you can hold it, observe it, and choose how to respond to it. Your body relaxes. Those chronic tensions you've carried for years begin to release, not because you forced them to, but because you finally created the safety for them to let go. Your creativity expands, because creativity doesn't come from the thinking mind, it comes from the spaces between thoughts. And when you live in those spaces more often, when you rest in the observer more consistently, ideas and insights arise naturally. And perhaps most importantly, you stop living from desperation, from the constant feeling that something is wrong, something is missing, something needs to be fixed or achieved or acquired before you can finally be okay. Instead, you discover that okayness isn't something you arrive at. It's what you are, it's what you've always been. And from that foundation of inherent okayness, you can create, explore, and experience life without the weight of needing it to be different than it is. This is freedom. Not the freedom to escape your life, but the freedom to fully inhabit it, to be present with what is, while simultaneously creating what wants to emerge. You'll forget this. That's important to understand. You'll read these words, maybe you'll practice for a few days or weeks, and then life will pull you back into old patterns. The mental chatter will take over again. The survival breathing will return. The observer will fade into the background. And that's okay. That's part of the process. Because the practice isn't about being perfect. It's about returning. Again and again and again. Every time you notice you've been lost in thought, you return to the breath. Every time you catch yourself in stress or anxiety, you return to the observer. Every time you feel overwhelmed by circumstances, you return to the still point. The power isn't in never getting lost. The power is in the returning. Because each return strengthens the pathway. Each return makes it easier to remember next time. Each return proves to your nervous system that this observer space is real, is accessible, is always available. Think of it like building a trail through a forest. The first time you walk it, it's barely visible. You have to push through brush and navigate around obstacles. But the 10th time, the 100th time, the 1000th time, the path becomes clear, easy, obvious. The observer breath is creating that path. From the constant thinking to the spacious awareness, from the reactive mind to the responsive presence, from who you think you are to who you actually are. And the beautiful thing is, you don't have to believe any of this for it to work. You don't have to understand the mechanics or the science or the spiritual teachings. You just have to practice. You just have to return to the breath, to the observer, to the still point. Everything else unfolds naturally from there. So here's what I'm asking you to do. Not tomorrow, not when you have more time. Right now, take a breath, a real one, slow and deep. And as you do, notice who's breathing. Notice who's watching the breath. Notice the space between the breather and the awareness of breathing. That space, that gap, that's where you actually live. That's your true home. And every conscious breath is a step toward remembering that. You don't need to change your whole life today. You don't need to commit to hours of practice. You just need to take one conscious breath, then another, and in between those breaths, in those pauses, rest. Be still, be the observer. Because in that stillness, in that observation, in that simple act of watching your own breath, you're not just surviving, you're creating. You're not just thinking about reality, you're shaping it from the inside out. The observer breath, the inner shift that changes everything. Not because it's complicated or requires years of training, but because it reminds you of something you've always known but forgot. You are not your thoughts. You are not your circumstances. You are not the voice in your head, or the story about your past, or the worry about your future. You are the awareness that watches it all, the still point at the center, the observer that never changes while everything else transforms around it. And when you live from that place, everything changes, not because you forced it to, but because you finally stopped interfering with what was trying to emerge all along. Breathe, observe, return. That's all there is. That's everything.